to let you keep her on the floor late?
Her work led her to having such a productive night. I mean, she's been working. She understands, where she can find her spots. The thing with KK in the first half, not in the right spots sometimes defensively, not in the right coverages sometimes defensively. In the second half, went back to her and she corrected it. So she's going to get her opportunities. She brings something different. We don't have she's athletic. She's really good at those cuts along the baseline. She understands where she can find success, and it's still a journey for her. I mean, second year and was in and out of rotation quite a bit last year. So I was pleased with what she gave us.
Coach here. A lot of players were frustrated on the court. It's not about officiating. It's how do you deal with that frustration? You came out a lot of half, maybe.
There in the third, we just got to be able to do that a little more consistently. But it was a great test. It was a great game. Our locker room was positive afterwards. So we're not going to hang our heads. We're going to move forward. A lot to be proud of and a lot to learn from too. So it was only one of 44. We got a long ways to go.
Caitlin, to your point on
Picture the scene. You are standing inside the absolute epicenter of the women's basketball universe, Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, Indiana. It is opening night of the 2026 WNBA season. The lights are blinding. The atmosphere is thick with an unprecedented, almost suffocating level of anticipation. The entire sports world has its collective eyes glued to the hardwood, waiting to witness the coronation of the most hyped, most offensively gifted roster in the entire history of the league. But when the final buzzer sounds, the confetti does not fall. The celebration does not happen. The coronation is completely canceled. Instead, the arena is left in a state of absolute, stunned disbelief. The Indiana Fever, on their own home floor, just put up a staggering, franchise record 104 points in a season opener. And they still lost the basketball game. Welcome back to WNBA She Serves. You already know exactly why you clicked on this video. If you are sick and tired of the mainstream sports media networks covering up massive coaching failures with polite, corporate public relations fluff, if you are exhausted by the establishment desperately trying to protect the front offices, you have found your absolute sanctuary. We do not do corporate spin. We do not protect the billionaires sitting in the executive suites. We do not smile and nod at post-game press conferences. We give you the raw, unfiltered, high-octane truth about the business and the blood sport of professional basketball. Grab a seat, lock in, and turn your volume all the way up to the absolute maximum level. Because today, we are surgically dissecting one of the most alarming, deeply concerning post-game press conferences in recent memory. We are breaking down the absolute defensive catastrophe that allowed the Dallas Wings to turn Gainbridge Fieldhouse into their own personal, uncontested layup line. We are exposing the terrifying physical toll that Caitlin Clark is already paying just 40 minutes into the season. And we are analyzing the exact microscopic quotes from head coach Stephanie White that prove this franchise is currently suffering from a massive, potentially fatal lack of defensive accountability. Let us immediately set the context and look at the raw, undeniable statistics, because the math from this opening night game is absolutely horrifying. The Dallas Wings came into Indianapolis and shot an astronomical 59% from the field. Let me repeat that, so the sheer absurdity of it fully sinks into your brain. 59% from the field. And they shot a blistering 52% from behind the three-point line. In professional basketball, if you allow an opposing team to shoot nearly 60% from the floor over the course of 40 minutes, you are not playing defense. You are running a charity event. You are actively rolling out the red carpet, opening the heavy doors to the paint, and cordially inviting the opposition to score at will. That is not a simple bad night. That is a fundamental, catastrophic collapse of defensive structure, rotational awareness, and tactical coaching. And how did head coach Stephanie White respond to this historic defensive humiliation? Did she slam her fist on the podium? Did she take absolute, uncompromising accountability for the fact that her defensive schemes were completely shredded by the Dallas guards? No, she stepped up to the microphone and delivered a masterclass in passive, excuse-laden corporate gaslighting. When a reporter explicitly pointed out that the Fever scored a franchise record 104 points and asked for her positive takeaways, Stephanie White smiled and said, "I like our pace. I like that we got to the free throw line. 22 points off of turnovers. I like all of that. You like all of that? Stephanie, you just gave up significantly more than 104 points in a regulation basketball game. Your team was completely out-hustled, out-rotated, and out-muscled on your own home floor, and you are sitting at the podium talking about how much you like your pace. This is the exact toxic, complacency-driven loser mentality that we have been warning this fan base about all off-season long." Stephanie White was allegedly brought in to be a defensive-minded coach. Her entire reputation was supposedly built on grit, discipline, and defensive structure. And yet, she just watched her team get absolutely cooked by the Dallas Wings, and her immediate reaction is to hunt for moral victories on a stat sheet. When pressed on the glaring defensive failures, she casually brushed it off, saying, "Sometimes we were over-rotated when we didn't need to be. Sometimes we had coverage breakdowns. All correctable things." Correctable things? You had an entire training camp. You had a full preseason. You have the most expensive, highly scrutinized roster in the WNBA. And your players are completely lost in defensive transition on opening night. She casually mentions that they were hanging around, not going to the offensive boards, but not getting back in transition defense. That means they were doing absolutely nothing. They were standing in no man's land while Dallas pushed the tempo and scored easy, uncontested fast break points while the coaching staff watched. But the tactical failure is only half of the nightmare. We absolutely have to talk about the terrifying physical reality that this press conference just exposed to the entire world. We have to talk about Caitlin Clark. During the game, the television broadcast noted that Caitlin Clark had to leave the floor and make multiple quick trips down the tunnel to the locker room. The fans inside the arena were holding their collective breath. The internet was in an absolute state of panic, terrified that their franchise point guard had suffered a severe injury. When a reporter finally asked about it in the press conference, the response from the coaching staff was chilling. Stephanie White casually dismissed it. She literally said, and I quote, "Hip alignment gets off, rib alignment gets off, and it's part of being a professional athlete." Let us pause the tape right there. Let us fully analyze the sheer terrifying magnitude of that specific statement. Game 1. It is Game 1 of a brutal, condensed, physically demanding 44-game regular season. And your franchise superstar, the economic golden goose of the entire league, the player who literally pays the bills for the WNBA, is getting hit so incredibly hard on the hardwood that her hips and her ribs are physically coming out of alignment. And the head coach's response is to shrug her shoulders, call it a mechanics issue, and label it as part of being a professional athlete? No, Stephanie, that is absolutely not part of being a professional athlete. That is the direct, undeniable result of a front office that completely failed to provide adequate physical enforcers on the roster to protect their superstar. That is the result of a fundamentally broken offensive system that forces Caitlin Clark to drive recklessly into the painted area, absorbing massive, punishing hits from power forwards and centers just to generate a whistle because the half-court spacing is completely non-existent. Caitlin Clark herself admitted it. When asked about her aggressive dribble drives to the basket, she said, "Getting my feet in the paint, whether I'm going to shoot it or not, makes them get in defensive rotation. And that's going to get my teammates a shot. That's definitely been a focus." Do you hear what she is actually saying? She is sacrificing her own physical body. She is willingly throwing herself into the absolute meat grinder of the WNBA paint, taking brutal, uncalled fouls just to collapse the defense because the coaching staff cannot design a competent off-ball screen to get anyone open. She is doing the dirty work because the tactical playbook is completely empty. And what happens if she keeps doing this? What happens if her hips and ribs keep coming out of alignment in Game 10, in Game 20, in Game 35? The human body has absolute physical limits. You cannot treat a generational point guard like a crash test dummy and expect her to survive a 44-game gauntlet. The Indiana Fever are playing a terrifying game of Russian roulette with Caitlin Clark's long-term health, and the coaching staff is treating it like a routine trip to the chiropractor. Now let us shift our focus to the other side of the backcourt. We absolutely have to talk about Kelsey Mitchell. Kelsey Mitchell dropped an absolutely spectacular 30 points in this season opener. She shot the lights out. She was fast, she was aggressive, and she proved exactly why she demanded that massive Supermax contract extension in the offseason. On paper, 30 points from your veteran shooting guard is a massive victory. But here at WNBA She Serves, we don't just look at the shiny box score. We look at the context. We look at the absolute reality of winning basketball. Kelsey Mitchell scoring 30 points in a massive shootout loss highlights the fundamental fatal flaw in the Indiana Fever's roster construction and coaching philosophy. They are built entirely like a run-and-gun, track-meet pickup squad. They are built to outscore you, not to stop you. Stephanie White herself admitted it at the podium. We're not going to be able to outscore teams in this league. Everybody's too good. You got to defend at multiple positions. If you know you cannot simply outscore teams, then why does your team look completely lost on defense? Why are you playing at a breakneck, exhausting pace that leaves your own players gasping for air and unable to communicate on defensive switches? Both Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell openly admitted to being completely physically exhausted in the first half of this game. Clark joked that no one could breathe, so no one could talk with the pace we were playing at. She mentioned that the coaches were yelling at them to keep running, and she was thinking, I don't know if either of us can keep running. This is pure coaching malpractice. If your two most important perimeter players are physically suffocating because the pace is too erratic, it is the head coach's absolute responsibility to recognize that. Call a timeout, slow the tempo down, and execute a disciplined half-court set to let them catch their breath. But Stephanie White just stood there, crossed her arms, and let them run themselves into the ground, directly into the waiting arms of the Dallas Wings transition offense. You cannot play winning basketball if your superstars are too exhausted to communicate on defensive rotations. It is a mathematical impossibility. And this leads us to the ultimate underlying truth of this entire post-game press conference. It was a subtle, highly professional, but undeniable shot fired by Caitlin Clark directly at the defensive execution of her own team. When asked to evaluate her first game back, Caitlin Clark gave a very media-trained answer, but the subtext was absolutely deafening. She said, and I quote, "Our offense is obviously not the issue. We're perfectly fine on offense, but you gotta give Dallas credit. They shot the ball incredibly well. Our offense is obviously not the issue." Let those words echo in your mind. That is a franchise player looking at the stat sheet, realizing she and her teammates just put up 104 points, and politely telling the world, "We did our job. We put the ball in the hoop. The coaching staff and the defensive schemes completely failed us on the other end of the floor." She is exactly right. You score 104 points in a WNBA regulation game, you are supposed to win by 15. You are supposed to empty the bench in the fourth quarter and let the rookies get some cardio. You are absolutely not supposed to be fighting for your life in the final two possessions while the opposing guards run uncontested layup drills through your painted area. The Indiana Fever are officially on notice. The honeymoon phase of the 2026 season is over after exactly 40 minutes of basketball. The fans are wide awake. The independent analysts are watching the film, and the harsh reality is staring this front office directly in the face. You cannot rely on Caitlin Clark to continuously sacrifice her ribs and her hips to save your broken offense. You cannot rely on Kelsey Mitchell dropping 30 points every single night just to keep the game mathematically competitive. And you absolutely cannot rely on a head coach who smiles and looks for positive takeaways after surrendering a 59% shooting performance to a conference rival. The defense has to be fixed. The rotations have to be tightened. The accountability has to be immediate, absolute, and ruthless. If Stephanie White cannot instantly transform this track meet mentality into a locked-in, gritty, championship-level defensive culture, then the Indiana Fever are going to completely waste the most talented offensive backcourt in the history of the sport. They have the offensive firepower to win a championship, but right now, they have the defensive structure of a high school junior varsity squad. The clock is ticking, the pressure is suffocating, and the next game is coming incredibly fast. This is WNBA She Serves. We are the only channel on this platform willing to look past the box score, cut through the corporate PR spin, and tell you exactly what is happening in the trenches of professional women's basketball. If you respect the uncompromising truth, if you appreciate the deep psychological, tactical analysis that the mainstream media is absolutely terrified to touch, do not just sit there. Smash that subscribe button right now and join the fastest growing community of highly educated basketball fans on the internet. Hit that like button to feed the algorithm and force YouTube to push the raw reality to the masses. And most importantly, I need to hear your absolute unfiltered thoughts in the comments section below. Who is to blame for this defensive disaster? Is Stephanie White completely out of her depth as a defensive tactician? Are you terrified for Caitlin Clark's long-term health after hearing about her ribs and hips coming out of alignment in Game 1? And can this roster actually win a championship if they have to score 110 points every single night just to survive? I want to read every